Hey everybody, Coach Mark here, and welcome to what is going to be the final episode in the Conjugate Codex series, Chapter 10, where we're just going to be going over everything we've talked about as well as concluding this long series. I really want to thank you all so much for watching it to this point. Hopefully you've been able to glean some value. With that being said, let's get into it. So these past few months, we really have been all over the place. We talked about the Eastern versus Western Roman Empire and how that relates to Conjugate, a glute specialization program. Ultimately, the Codex was a passion project of mine done to help demystify this training method and explain the underlying principles thereof, as well as share as how it can work for a wide variety of applications and populations. I'll be honest, as I wrap this series up, I find myself a bit sad. I've had a lot of fun, and hopefully you have too. So in Chapter 1, I offered this definition of conjugate. Conjugate is a concurrent training framework designed to improve multiple physical qualities at once, with the flexibility to refine and emphasize specific traits through sequential phases when needed. And what this essentially did is it unified both Western conjugate via the West Side barbell method, as well as Eastern style conjugate from Yuri Verkhoshansky, which was more of a block periodization approach. One of the big things is understanding that you need variation with intention when it comes to conjugate. You don't want to just pick random variations for amusement, but instead pick variations that both expose and strengthen weak links, be it portions within a specific movement, such as a pause squat for fixing the bottom of it, or a specific muscle group, such as a close grip bench press to improve the triceps. Now, within that capacity, when we talk about conjugate, it's important to understand that ultimately it's about concurrent training in that we aim to improve multiple dimensions at once for performance and appearance, depending on what your individual goals are. In Volume 2, the big discussion was about the 3-effort model and how that made a conjugate program, and also the interplay of them. The 3 efforts all work together concurrently to improve a lifter's capabilities. Max effort was the ability to strain through a hard lift, as well as attack weak links within a movement pattern. Dynamic effort was done to help train the ability to accelerate with intention through a lift's full duration, as well as help flutter the brakes a little bit so you're not lifting as heavy as possible and running yourself into the ground. And then lastly is the repeated effort or repetitive effort method. I tend to bounce back and forth between calling it either or. I've heard both. I like both. And that's just the idea of muscularity to support heavier lifts as well as joint integrity. And hey, who doesn't like a good pump? Additionally, in the Conjugate Codex, I talked about how we might make some very big and sweeping adaptations to the dynamic effort method model as well. Speaking of, that's where we're going to start off here, because in Volume 3, we discussed heavily the idea of bottlenecks in a lifter's capability, such as work capacity, lifting skill, and positional strength, as well as efficiency. And this is where the developmental counterpart to the dynamic effort method came into play. And the idea was you'd use special methods to help remedy these various issues, such as if you had a work capacity issue, you might try density work. If you had a skill and positioning issue, you might try either triphasic or tempo work. Whereas if you had an efficiency issue, it might be either speed or skill work. The definition we worked with here was developmental work is done specifically to correct identified bottlenecks in a lifter's ability to express maximal strength on a given lift. Just to help expand on this a bit more without going into a full lecture, think of it like this. If you are a lifter who has bad work capacity, spamming sets of 5 for 20 minutes is a great way to improve your work capacity. If you're someone who tends to fall apart on the eccentric phase of their squat, you might spend a few weeks doing slow eccentrics rather than speed work to give you more time and exposure to where it is you're deficient in that specific movement. Additionally, I want to take a moment to thank Shane Reese with MST Strongman Training. He was kind enough to take time out of his day to show up on this video and discuss how he applies conjugate training, as well as give me a little tip of the cap, which is always kind of nice. In Volume 4, we defined max effort as max effort work being training to strain with constraints that force a lifter to develop a relevant attribute, such as emphasizing a specific muscle group or part of a lift. This differs from developmental work as it uses loading and intensity to drive adaptation versus repeated practice. So for example, if you have weak triceps, we could use developmental waves that focus on growing the triceps, such as density or just basic power building waves, whereas in max effort, our progression is not done through a long-term wave, but through chasing intensity and sequential loading improvements thereafter. Possible adaptations to this method discussed were using the same variation for several weeks at a time, multiple rep maxes, back off volume and mechanical progressions, such as going from a close grip Larson press to a close grip bench to a regular bench press. If you did 3 weeks of each of those, that's a 9-week mechanical progression wave. And doing any of these or all of these combined together allow a lifter more time with a variation with the aim of allowing them to extract more benefit from it. As is often the case, the first time you do a lift, you're still figuring out how it feels. If you give yourself a couple more touches and exposures to it, you can often glean more benefit from it long term. But then if you keep it, say 3 to 5 weeks, it also keeps you from running to accommodation and plateauing long term. In Volume 5, we discussed repeated effort, which we defined as repetitive effort work being training to develop a wide base of additional muscularity and work capacity using lower demand movements to support higher peaks of strength and performance. Within this, the applications we discussed primarily were using ways to make the work more enjoyable, such as gamifying progress like X reps in Y amount of sets, heavy use of bodybuilding type intensifiers such as rest pause, density increasing measures such as 8x8, and generally biasing more towards intensity and density over simply adding sets by sticking to no more than 3 total working sets. Also at this time, we want to take a brief moment. I want to thank Steve Shaw of Massive Iron for showing up for this video. He was able to come join us, chime in a bit about how he understands concurrent training and his application thereof, as well as kindly give me a little bit of a thumbs up on how I do about Conjugate, so make sure to check out his channel as well. He's honestly one of my biggest mentors. Volume 6 was all about scheduling and how to make a split work for you. In broad terms, a training split is simply a way of organizing the 3 efforts of training across a week to maximize training compliance and survivability. A few sample splits were the vanilla, lower, upper 2 each, so you'd have lower, max and developmental, upper, max and developmental. Then for 3 days a week, you could go lower max, upper max, and full body developmental. You could do 3 times a week full body. And for a unique one, we discussed the 1-1-2 split, which is lower max, upper max, full body developmental. And then the 4th day would either be another full body developmental or a specialization day, such as focusing strictly on glutes or arms. Additionally, quick little sidebar here, this is what a split might look like if you can only train 2 days a week. So on the first day, you're going to go lower max, upper developmental, and then full body accessories. Second day of the week would be upper maximum, lower developmental, and then full body accessories thereafter. You could certainly do both max effort and both developmental days on the same day, but I think this helps spread out the volume and intensity a bit more, especially if you are only training 2 days a week. We want to make sure that both days are as survivable as possible, as you are likely someone who has a lot of outside of gym stress or obligations, so we want to make the training fit within your life rather than trying to make your life revolve around the training. Lucky 7 was all about strongman training, with the idea being that a properly scheduled training week for the strongman athlete sees them improving their limit and repetitive strength while also driving skill and positional adaptations to prevent bottlenecks in their long-term progress. A few of the key foci with this were focusing on the 3 to 8 rep range to simulate event work, as this is often a good range to be in for these 4 reps for a 1 minute of the type events. Lots of skill work such as using complexes or paused work, conditioning and strength endurance, so we'd often use 8x8 method for example, as well as rest pause. Pressing, pulling, carrying, and loading through multiple positions and angles is certainly the norm within strongman, so it does synergize really well with Conjugate in that aspect since we have variation with intention. In Volume 8, big emphasis was discussing power building training. So for a power builder, a properly structured training week will maximize the number of hard sets performed in that week across the entire body, while also enabling intra-session recovery to create long-term sustainability while maximizing mental buy-in and enjoyment of training. In the simplest of terms, Conjugate works well for power building, assuming you apply the principles correctly, because what it allows us to do is we can bias different muscles throughout an entire training wave and also keep the lifter engaged. You might have a bodybuilding program that's 100% perfect on paper, but if by the end of those 12 weeks you're so checked out that you're only giving it 60% effort, you're worse off than if someone had a program that was 80% optimal and they attacked it with 100% compliance. And again, adjusting every few weeks as well just makes it a bit more fun, gives you more opportunities to progress. Ultimately, you need to understand with power building training, it's a means that seeks overload not only for strength's own sake, but also as being a proxy for muscle growth. So adding more weight to the bar is both a desired outcome as well as a side effect of the training itself. We want to focus on both limit strength and muscular size / appearance. Really, for a lot of us, this is how we should be training because we want a bit of both. Nothing wrong with that. Lifestyle training was Volume 9, and when it comes to lifestyle training, one of the big things to understand here is the training itself does take back seat to life outside of the gym. Movement constraints become a matter of simply picking movements that will cause the desired adaptations while not interfering with day-to-day life. No lifts at this point in the game are absolutely mandatory. You need to think movement patterns and maximize enjoyment. For someone who is just looking to, build some nice legs, they don't necessarily need to be doing a barbell back squat. They could do a pendulum squat. They could do a hack squat. Again, it's all about driving adaptations and using the underlying principles within a Conjugate framework to get them to those goals. Conjugate ultimately helps hedge against boredom, which is one of the biggest enemies of a lifestyle trainee, because as is often the case, They aren't chasing overload for the sake of overload, nor are they trying to pack on as much muscle mass as possible, but often they're in a position where they want to do a bit of everything all at once. And by combining elements of power building alongside strongman-inspired conditioning, this allows us to do exactly that. This is in turn a very viable application for most, so you can call that the strongman everyman style of training. Another quick sidebar here, I've talked a bit about strongman, I've talked about power building, and I've talked about lifestyle training. What you see on screen now is actually a bodybuilding style split that I made for one of my clients who, as of recording this video today, is competing at his first competition ever. So you can see what we've done here is we've actually done a 5-day split where we have pull and push max effort days, just a leg day, and then pull and push developmental days, which replace the dynamic effort method. So you can see how even though this is a bodybuilding program, we have the underlying principles of a proper conjugated training sequence, because what we're doing is we're using variations to preferentially target muscle groups that need more development, as well as using methods and means to drive both work capacity and hypertrophy increases. Ultimately, I want you to take away from the Codex series that Conjugate is not just banded speed work and maxing out, but it's a system of training that improves multiple dimensions of physical ability at once through targeted variations, building a base of muscular support, developing your work capacity, and avoiding bottlenecks via skill development. It can work for most any application and phase in your life, but it must be applied correctly. I'd like to leave you with this quote. It was Harrington Emerson who said this. As to methods, there may be a million and then some, but principles are few. The man who grasps principles can successfully select his own methods. The man who tries methods, ignoring principles, is sure to have trouble. And with that, and with admittedly a bit of a heavy sigh, we wrap up the Conjugate Codex series. This is video 10. It has been a really fun couple months doing this. If you've watched it to this point, I can't thank you enough for being here. It really means the world to me. Like I said, this was a passion project. I had a lot of fun. If you have any comments or questions, please drop them down below. The best ones are ones I will turn into video. Also, I do offer one-to-one coaching. It's what I do full-time. Odds are very good. I'd love to work with you. But even if you don't want to work with me, hopefully you found something useful that'll help you with your own training, and let me know if it does. Anyways, I'll catch you all in the next video. Have a good one.